If you're anything like me, you've probably heard a ton of people talking about how they don't want to have their Second Amendment rights violated. And this phrase, Second Amendment rights, absolutely makes my skin crawl. I know if you've been listening to this show or watching it for any amount of time, you've heard me mention this over and over and over, but I want to get into this a little bit more. It's as if they believe that the people have the right to keep and bear arms because of the Second Amendment. This couldn't be more wrong. In fact, it's almost totally opposite. And to kick this off, I want to start talking a little bit about where we get our rights from. And hear from Thomas Paine, at least correcting where we don't get them from. He said, "It is a perversion of terms to say that a charter gives rights." So you don't get your rights from a document. You don't get it from a constitution. You don't get them from a charter of any kind. John Dickinson, the penman of the American Revolution, put it almost the same way in 1776. He said, "Our liberties do not come from charters, for these are only the declaration of pre-existing rights." And of course, the Bill of Rights is not a grant of rights to the people. It is a set of restrictions, additional restrictions on government. And you can read that in the preamble to the Bill of Rights. Most people don't even know the Bill of Rights has a preamble, but that's an episode in and of itself. So our liberties do not come from charters. We don't get our liberty, we don't get our rights from the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. As Thomas Jefferson put it, he said, "A free people," so if you're really free, now if you're not a free people, maybe you get some privileges from government. But if you're going to be a free people, you're going to act like a free people. He said, "They claim their rights as derived from the laws of nature and not as the gift of their chief magistrate." So if you are living in a state of freedom, you claim your rights as natural rights, whether the government happens to agree with you or not. And this was a huge part of the American Revolution, this view of natural rights and power emanating from the people. The revolution, the real American Revolution, of course, was a radical change in the views and sentiments of the people, and the War for Independence was really just an outgrowth of that. Here's Samuel Adams and the rights of the colonists. He said, and mind you, this is not an extensive list. "Among the natural rights of the colonists are these. First, a right to life. Secondly, to liberty. Thirdly, to property, together with the right to support and defend them in the best manner they can." And Adams followed that by pointing out where this comes from. He said, "These are evident branches of, rather than deductions from, the duty of self-preservation, commonly called the first law of nature." So to Samuel Adams, the first law of nature is self-preservation. And if you can't defend yourself, you can't have self-preservation. It's an evident branch of that. And we heard this over and over and over. Here, for example, Simeon Howard, I believe. This is a sermon preached to the Ancient and Honorable Artillery Company in Boston in 1773. Think of the timing on that. And here's how Simeon put it. "Self-preservation is one of the strongest and a universal principle of the human mind. And this principle allows of everything necessary to self-defense." It's not something, I'll just finish his quote here, "opposing force to force and violence to violence. This is so universally allowed that I need not attempt to prove it." Now, of course, he was urging people to take a stand, self-defense against the British in a particular situation. But you have to keep in mind that if you have a principle, universal principle of self-preservation, and out of that, an outgrowth of that, a right and a duty of self-defense, then you don't have to get an approval from a government or from any outside source to tell you what you need as far as your right to self-preservation and self-defense. And I think that's a pretty powerful statement. Here's St. George Tucker some decades later, 30 years, I guess. My math is terrible. I went to government-run school. Anyway, so St. George Tucker, in his view of the Constitution of the United States, 1803, pointed out that the right of self-defense is the first law of nature. So he's looking at it a little differently. Samuel Adams called self-preservation the first law of nature. Here's how St. George Tucker put it. Arthur Lee, I think, we're not certain he wrote this, but everywhere that I see it cited, this is writing as Tribunus in a preface to Thomas Jefferson's summary view of the rights of British America in 1774. Here's how he put it. He was talking about self-defense, and he called it the great and primary law of nature. So there's some disagreement of whether self-preservation or the right of self-defense was the primary or the first law of nature, but it's all pretty similar. Mercy Otis Warren, she said self-defense is a primary law of nature, which no subsequent law of society can abolish. None. And Theophilus Parsons, here he is in Massachusetts, arguing in support of ratification in early 1788 during the Massachusetts Ratifying Convention. He said that no power was given to Congress in the newly proposed Constitution. He's saying, hey, don't worry about your natural rights, because no power was given to Congress to infringe on any one of the natural rights of the people. Now, he didn't have to list out what those natural rights of the people were, especially in Massachusetts, especially in a place where everyone knew what Samuel Adams was talking about some years earlier, the natural rights of the colonists, right to life, liberty, property, along with the right to support and defend them in the best manner they can. So when Theophilus Parsons is saying no power is given to Congress to infringe on natural rights, he's talking about these, and these are among the natural rights. And I thought it was interesting. I don't think there's anything intentional about this because it's years earlier, before ratification of the Second Amendment. He said no power was given to them to infringe. And we think of the right to keep and bear arms and so-called Second Amendment rights. We think of the phrase shall not be infringed. Here's Roger Sherman in the House of Representatives during some debates in 1790. He said it is the privilege of every citizen and one of his most essential rights to bear arms and to resist every attack upon his liberty or property by whomsoever made. Roger Sherman really hammered it there as well. Patrick Henry with his own view of this as well. Of course, Patrick Henry certainly was in support of the natural right of self-defense. And here in the Virginia Ratifying Convention, he's urging everyone to exercise that right. The great object, he said, is that every man be armed. James Wilson, one of the leading Federalists of the time, maybe we could call him one of the most influential Federalists. Certainly a lot of people think that the Federalist Papers were highly influential, and we really cite them far more than they were probably read and understood during the ratification debates. But James Wilson, one of the big government Federalist guys of the time in support of the Constitution, his State House yard speech, his explanation of the Constitution was way more influential on the ratification debates. This wasn't from that speech, but he really was a very highly respected legal mind. He made it onto the Supreme Court, was nominated for that role by George Washington. But here he is talking about the right of self-defense. He said, the defense of oneself, justly called the primary law of nature, is not, nor can it be abrogated by any regulation of municipal law. So by any, can't be abrogated by any regulation whatsoever. I think that pretty much nails it. At the end of the day, referring to your rights by amendment number, and does not just Second Amendment rights, but First Amendment rights, my Fourth Amendment rights. I've even heard people say my 10th Amendment rights. It empowers the people who claim the power to determine the extent of those amendments, what those amendments mean. And there's a lot of those people, they claim the power to say, well, oh, of course you have your Second Amendment rights, and here's what the Second Amendment means, or here's what the First Amendment means. By referring to it by amendment number, you're basically giving them the power to decide what that means in practice. And then in essence, really what they do is they limit those rights. That's really what they do all the time. And really, when you get down to it, the Second Amendment is not your gun permit. You are. I'm going to link to all these original source documents so you can read these quotes in context on your own time. I'm just scratching the surface. I will publish a blog post of this about 1 to 2 hours after this live stream is done here in a minute or two over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path-to-liberty. And of course, if you support us getting this kind of message out to more and more people, nothing helps us get that job done more than the financial faith and support of our members. You can join us for as little as $2 a month over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Again, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. We also have annual, lifetime, and 5-year options. Don't feel any obligation to join us, but any consideration you can give today, I'd be very, very grateful for your support. I'm not sure what the schedule is going to be next week with the long weekend and the holiday on Monday. I might do a show. I might do one on Tuesday. I might skip it. It just depends what the schedule's like for me. But I really appreciate you being here. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope you have a long weekend. And I hope to see you next week here on the Path to Liberty.